My name is Evan Ziporyn. I'm here as Faculty Director of MIT's Center for Art, Science, and Technology, CAST, and the name of this talk is Art Science Collaborations at MIT Case Studies. And just to let you know, and apologies in advance, this talk will have very little to do with astronomy, actually nothing, at least directly, but will be more about art science collaborations in general, as illustrated by some of the collaborations we've helped to support at MIT. Also, just to let you know my own personal perspective, the basis of my own interest in this is as a composer, that is, as an artist. A major part of my own practice in recent years has shifted toward collaborations with engineers and scientists. For example, this project that you will see right here, if I share my screen properly, always a little bit of a, there it is. Um, This is a multimedia immersive piece of performance and installation art called Arachnodrone Spider's Canvas. And experiences like this, making this piece in collaboration with various people in and out of MIT, these personal experiences were how I came to be interested in these type of projects more generally and why I became involved with the MIT Center. CAST, as we call it, was founded in 2012 and is so starting its 10th year. As our name, Center for Art, Science, and Technology suggests, we have a somewhat broad mandate and we support work in a number of fields of arts and sciences. But more importantly, all of our programs are in some aspect cross-disciplinary, often collaborations between art and science, or more specifically between artists and scientists. To give you a sense, this slide is a list of the departments and programs that we've worked with in the last decade. As you can see, there's 34 in all if you want to count. And you can see that it's quite expansive, ranging from performance and visual arts on the one hand to engineering, architecture, urban studies, and of course into the hard sciences, including earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences, though not, as yet, astronomy per se. So today I'm going to tell you about a few of the more successful or at least robust collaborations that we've supported to try to evince some commonalities between them and to convey some operating principles in the hopes that it might be useful to you in planning similar work. Art science collaborations at MIT have a long history. They did not start with Art Center, with CAST. MIT, of course, has a nice reputation for scientific rigor, but art has been part of the Institute since its inception in 1861, with the arts themselves becoming curricular in the mid-20th century. As for arts innovation, MIT was actually the first American university to establish a program in artistic research when artist György Kepes established the Center for Advanced Visual Studies in 1967. And this set the tone for a number of related developments, leading to the establishment in 1985 of the very well-known Media Lab, which of course emphasizes more high-tech design research, but which always involved and continues to involve the significant participation of artists on all levels. The Media Lab is not the only one of these programs to continue today, and collectively they demonstrate that MIT has been engaged for many years with finding ways for art and science to mutually support and enhance one another. One somewhat surprising fact is how central the curricular presence of the arts is in the life of MIT students, in and out of the classroom. In fact, in any given year, over half the MIT undergraduate population are taking at least one arts class for credit. And even during the COVID lockdowns, which we're just coming out of now, the orchestras and musical ensembles were fully enrolled, our drawing classes are overflowing, and the quality of accomplishment is, in my view, as good as not, if not better, than at top peer institutions. So at the very least, we feel we've achieved at MIT a healthy coexistence between art and science. But while this coexistence is very important, it's very different than collaboration, that is direct contact and direct cross-fertilization between the arts and the laboratory, between artists and researchers. Our center is keenly interested in this, and because our center is not part of one school at MIT or one program, as this slide shows, we have both the opportunity and the challenge of, and I think the responsibility to be somewhat free range, to make connections between programs that otherwise might exist in isolation, allowing us to connect artists with particular labs, centers, and individuals in all disciplines, and to foster richer and more interactive forms of collaboration between them. The Programs we support include visiting artist residencies, cross-disciplinary classes, faculty grants, and public programs and publications. Our process is multi-staged, but we try to do it in a way that allows for open inquiry and exploration. And while I know this is a little detailed for a short talk, I think it's important to outline, at least conceptually, what that process is. The first point, proposals and buy-in from the MIT community. For us, a top-down approach does not work. We understood this from the beginning, that for projects to be successful, they needed to have not just the cooperation, but the full engagement of the laboratory, of a director, of a program, in other words, of stakeholders. And to us, the best way to do this was to call for proposals from the community. So we do this twice yearly in a way that begins very simply and briefly. We ask for a very brief proposal, no details, no budget. We then talk with the applicant or applicants. We assess compatibility with our general mission, fiscal viability. We discuss ways to bolster the forms of engagement, if necessary, to help find the right artist or partners. And we try to clarify the goals and the outcome to the extent that these can be anticipated. We then ask for fuller proposals, which are then put to an internal selection committee of MIT faculty, researchers, and students. Once a project is funded, we continue the dialogue and facilitation all the way through to the project's completion. But by doing this work on the front end, this means that in the case of the visiting artists, for example, if a project is funded, we already know that the artist will truly be embedded in ongoing research and testing, which is the second point on this list. Of course, I have my own opinions about art, as does my co-director, our committee, our staff, but by making these conversations open-ended and truly empowering and listening to our selection committee, we try to avoid bias and instead look to substantive exchanges between artists and engineers and/or artists and scientists of whatever discipline. Rather than focusing on the end result, we look to the robustness of the collaboration itself, how mutually beneficial it potentially may be to the parties involved. So we look for projects where the research and development is on both sides of the aisle, for the lab and for the artist. We are mindful of student engagement because ultimately that's what it's all about, but we also understand that this can take different forms. Some projects involve intensive ongoing work by graduate students. Others are more about broader-based classroom experiences. Others more public-facing, lectures, demonstrations, installations, performances. We want there to be some kind of public component to the project, but we are not so concerned with deliverables as we are with goals as being necessary to facilitate process, and therefore being somewhat flexible. So that while every project we sponsor does have some kind of statable goal, specific work to be done, something to be achieved, we are trying to foster an environment that is also conducive to unexpected outcomes, to surprises, offshoots, new directions, discoveries. And with this model, as you've seen and as you can see, over the past 9 years, we've sponsored quite a number of varied activities and reached a large number of students and members of the community at MIT, in the Boston area, nationwide, and even internationally. In order to stimulate interest, we also make sure to leave room for exploratory visits from potential artist collaborators, relatively short visits with no fixed agenda, just bringing an artist around to tour labs, have conversations, and see what might ensue. This was the case with the first artist I'd like to talk about, our inaugural visiting artist, Tomas Saraceno, who needs very little introduction, just an incredible visual artist, a visionary thinker, activist. Tomas first came to MIT in 2012, right at the inception of CAST, for what started as an exploratory visit but resulted in ongoing CAST-sponsored work at MIT in collaboration with 3 departments: civil engineering, earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences, and music and theater arts. So just a few examples of what came out of that. Well, first, let's talk about spiderwebs. So Tomas's interest here caught the attention of Professor Marcus Buehler, then head of civil engineering. Tomas was familiar with Marcus's lab research on spiderweb silk, and Tomas himself had developed 3D spider web scanning technology with TU Darmstadt. At MIT, Tomas shared these scans with Marcus's lab and subsequently gave them their own tropical tent spider, a spider in residence, if you will. And that lovely creature, being a spider, built her own web, which the lab then scanned, using their own refinement of Tomas's technique. They then created a virtual 3D model of the web, and this led to a series of experiments, several research papers, and one completed dissertation. This impacted Tomas's own ongoing spider-related art, and sparked two other artistic collaborations, both of which I was lucky enough to be involved in. This is the Spider Jam session, which Tomas organized for various venues. That's me. And this is the Arachnodrone Spiders Canvas project that was generated here at MIT with myself, Isabel Sue, Christine Southworth, and Ian Hatwick. So here we already see a clearly symbiotic relationship between artist, lab, and, honestly, spider. Simultaneously, Tomas developed a relationship with MIT's Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences in connection with his Erisine project. Erisine advocates fossil-free flight and has in fact conducted multiple test flights, including the world's first fully solar-powered human free flight, which launched from Argentina a couple of years ago. To assist in this, a team of MIT atmospheric scientists developed software which Tomas named the Float Predictor, an interactive website that uses atmospheric data to determine potential flight paths for the Erisine, and which is now part of the project. And the team was also able to do some test flights on the MIT campus, as you can see here. And this work has been presented at numerous international venues, ranging from the Paris Climate Summit in 2015 to Saraceno's own large one-man exhibition at the Paris Palais de Tokyo in 2018. So here we have a situation in which researchers were able to channel at least some part of their work into an ongoing work of experimental art and environmental advocacy. And CAST's role was simply to set some initial conditions to make some meetings happen, facilitate dialogue, and the results were multidisciplinary and fluid. Research, both published and ongoing, tools for art and science, and new artwork both by Tomas himself and others in dialogue with him. Outcomes both expected and unforeseen, and work that continues past the residency itself. The other set of collaborations that I'd like to discuss involve the artist Agnieszka Kurant, also a highly distinguished visual artist. Her first project at MIT was a collaboration with a group of graduate students from a number of disciplines working on a signature hack for MIT's annual Hacking Arts Festival, which we helped to sponsor. The result was the Animal Internet, which you're seeing a bit of here. In the interest of time, I won't go into details, but Animal Internet involves live webcams of polar bears and tigers convolved with algorithms calibrating crowdsourced emotional responses from the Internet, resulting in what Kurant calls a collective Tamagotchi, and only made possible by collaboration that included work from multiple disciplines and, of course, the right artist. My co-director Leela Kinney brought Agnieszka to the attention of Boris Katz, a research scientist in CSAIL InfoLab. CSAIL is the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. And the result was this work, Assembly Line, a very different sort of crowdsourced algorithmic sculpture, which involves what I can best describe as an inversion of facial recognition technology. You can find out more about both works at OpenSpace, which is SF-MoMA's online platform. This then spurred a commission from MIT for Kurant to create a large piece of public art based on anonymous signatures for display on the facades of two new buildings at MIT's newly refurbished Kendall Square, again in collaboration with MIT computer scientists and students. And I'm really thrilled to say that this project is now up and running. You can see it in the blue script there. So this is a much more straightforward outcome, but very positive one. 3 significant works by an extremely interesting artist, all done and indeed only possible in this particular iteration by collaboration with MIT researchers. Just a general breakdown of, every residency is different, every visiting artist is different. I'm talking to you about the successes. There have been other successes, and there have been other projects that have had more mixed results. But what we found that what works is, first of all, an artist who does their own preparation and research, and an artist who has the ability to break down their vision into concrete elements that can be subject to collaboration with people of particular expertise. On the scientific end, scientists and engineers need to be willing to suspend disbelief for a bit, and more than even suspending disbelief, to release researchers and equipment from some of the very important, more deliverable projects that they're working on in order to give them time to take on this kind of less directed work. Um, Both sides need to find common ground around experimentation, risk-taking, problem-solving, um, and it's very important that both sides of the collaboration feel that they're getting rewarding outcomes in their respective fields. Some of the threats to collaboration we found, one of the big ones that's becoming increasingly important and that we're looking at more and more carefully is the conflicts around authorship and ownership, because artists and scientists often have very different ideas about what that means and about who is ultimately the author of a work of art, or the owner of the work of art, or the author of the research that goes into it. Um, it is very important to avoid a situation in which either party feels that they're being used as a studio system by the other. So if a lab begins to feel like they're simply making stuff for an artist, or an artist begins to feel like they're just kind of doing stuff for the lab, that's not optimal. Um, and sometimes this is a problem because there are very different conceptions of problem solving, whether a problem what it means to solve a problem, basically, which can be very different in engineering or the sciences than in art. Um, this also takes the form of having very different definitions of abstraction and of also of simply what a successful outcome might be. One of the other threats to collaboration is things that we can't control, like the way the outside world is going to react to something. So, for example, if the press gets interested in the artwork but not the research behind it, or vice versa, that can lead to bad feelings. Um, and so we find that by dealing with these authorship and ownership issues out front, making sure that the possible conflicts and differing definitions are on the table and discussed and resolved leads to things working out better on the back end. What really works ultimately is asymmetry, what we call edge effects or parallel play, that the resonancy is really not the end of the story, not a conclusion, but an overture to future work, that it allows for duration and evolution. And most of all, the most important thing of all to me is that it embraces unexpected outcomes. Um, as proud as I am of the work I've talked about today, I personally feel that that last uh, bullet point, unexpected outcomes, that is the most satisfying part of these collaborations. These are non-quantifiable, but to me they're what matters most. For example, what happens after a CAST-sponsored program is completed. So how an artist's work might have changed, or how a research lab might have expanded its focus or shifted its methodologies, even if only subtly, and even if it's only for part of their work. These are things that are not easy to track or measure. They can be subtle, they can be subjective, and they don't reveal themselves on a timetable or lend themselves too much to a timely final report on a project. But these are the things that, when they occur, or when I know about them, make me the proudest of what CAST has helped make happen. Thank you.